Welcome, pole vault coaches, athletes, and enthusiasts to the pole vault coaching series. It is here that the pole vault community gathers to learn, share, and collaborate. Please make sure to follow us on Instagram at PV Coaching Series and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Tonight, we have Coach Hayes joining us from the University of Kansas. Coach Hayes brings a wealth of knowledge and an impressive resume to tonight's talk. In 17 seasons as the pole vault coach at Kansas, he's coached 4 national champions and many more All-Americans and Big 12 champions for both the men's and women's programs. Prior to arriving at Kansas, Coach Hayes spent time at the University of Nevada, Wichita State, Arizona, and Johnson Community College. At these stops, he coached 3 more national champion pole vaulters. Coach Hayes' accomplishments have not gone unnoticed. In 2002, he was selected to be the IAAF Event Development Coordinator for the pole vault, and has also been awarded the 2011 National Collegiate Pole Vault Coach of the Year and the 2017 USTF CCA Midwest Region Men's Indoor Assistant Coach of the Year. It is my honor to be able to share and learn with you tonight on the pole vault coaching series with Coach Tom Hayes. Welcome, Coach Hayes.
Thanks, Joe. Am I good to go?
You are good to go.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Hey, I want to first thank Joe for what he's done and created this platform for us to get a lot of information from our peers. It's one of the coolest things. I watch almost every week, and if I don't watch, I watch the reruns. And it just kind of it's cool to get an idea of how you guys think. And that's what I'm going to try to do tonight, is share some of the things I think. And I lay in. Also want to say, Gio, the last time when we watched you do it, I was really excited about the energy. So I apologize if I'm not as energetic as you are, but we need more coaches like you in the event, and it was exciting to watch. Okay, Joel asked me, what I want to talk about, and basically, and then he asked me, what do you want to name your presentation? And expanding your toolbox, the art of the vault, and maybe it should be the art of coaching the vault. And I want to, because through all these presentations, I've noticed they're all similar. We're all talking a little bit about our philosophy and what we want to do or coach. And what I hope to do is give you some organization that you can take home some stuff and put in your toolbox. There's stuff I do that some might not fit into your toolbox, but I hope it does, and give you a different way to look at the vault and evaluate yourself. So my goal is to basically try to get you to think a little bit differently, or maybe the same. Hang on, okay. So the art of coaching, when you're coaching a young kid, one thing I think you need to know is sometimes you need to think that we're coaching the kid, not necessarily the pole vault and the way we do things. So as a coach, you got to know what you're looking for. We got to learn how to evaluate. And if we don't know what we're looking for, we can't evaluate. One thing that I've noticed with a lot of coaches, they get set on a certain thing they're looking for, and their philosophy clouds their evaluation process. So I think you got to come into each situation and keep an open mind and not let your thoughts cloud what that kid's really doing. I think you got to understand your strengths and weaknesses, and obviously work toward your strengths. But if you don't know your weaknesses, you probably don't know which direction you're pushing the kid or not. So work on that a lot. I chose this next picture to kind of give you an idea of what I'm trying to do. The one on the left, or Jen, it's a busy picture. There's a lot of information going on there. And it's not meant to show you anything besides that it's busy. And then what I'm trying to get you to do is take some of that information out and make it simple. having a little technically difficulties. But if you'll notice here, you know, we don't have the pole there. Okay, do you see something a little different? You know, that's the art of coaching. You know, you take something away and start looking at something else. And hopefully I give you some direction through this talk on how I do it. Okay, how do you evaluate? You know, I think all of us look, and maybe Coach Butler kind of put me on this direction, but how do you watch films? Here's what our guys do. We watch regular speed, then slow motion, and then we watch frame by frame, and then we watch slow motion again. And we do this because we're trying to feel the rhythm of the event. You'll hear that quite a bit tonight, I hope. I think you need to feel the rhythm of it and feel the moving of it. It's not a stop vault. Okay. I was training a kid. He's an 18-foot kid that came when I was at the University of Arizona, and he was done with school, so he lived with me. And so I'd come home, and he'd be looking at a film, and he'd look at that same still picture for about 15 or 20 or even 30 minutes, and I couldn't figure out what he was looking at. And then I came home the next day, and it was about 2 or 3 frames in front of what he was looking at the day before. Come home the third day, and I turned off his computer because he was looking at 2 or 3 frames. And that's kind of where we really started saying, okay, how do you look at things? How do you understand things? And I think that we've got to keep in mind that it's a moving event and not a still frame event. So watch it and feel the rhythm first, then slow it down, see if you can pick up a little bit, and then watch it frame by frame. But always go back and watch it with a little movement. I like to keep score in everything we do. One of the things I think that's really important is some people just vault, and we're always going to keep score. I've got a little formula in a vaulting practice because we're trying to create a situation where you can be successful. So I'll have 10 jumps, and our formula is we try to stay, and it's going to get different with different kinds of activities. But you say we got 10 jumps. We try to always stay above 70% positive jumps, okay? If we can stay above 70%, 90% of the time, I know the kids are going to improve with probably not much information from me. If I just kept score, I knew that'd happen. The third thing is we always test. Now, understand why you're testing, and that same 7 out of 10 jumps or 10 out of 10 jumps is a way to test. Mondo, when he was younger, and it's interesting, Doug Fraley told me a story about where he took 50 jumps in a row at a bar, and he made all 50 of them. And I think somewhat that's where he developed his skill. He learned how to make bars early. Okay, when you're coaching an athlete, you got to understand what type of vaulter they are. And what I mean by that is each vaulter might be coached a little different. And I've got some films here in a second that I'm going to show you, and I hope I can help you. So vaulter number 1, we're just going to label vaulter number 1. That vaulter uses a run and takeoff to move the pole. Okay, you're going to coach that vaulter a certain way. Or there's going to be some things that you need to think about when you coach that vaulter. Vaulter number 2 might not move the pole until they leave the ground. And when they move the pole, they move it with the swing. They're at the plant, the pole might send to stop a second, and when they get all their weight, they tend to swing. They tend to move the pole with their swing. Vaulter number 3 is what we're trying to get our kids to do. And we're trying to move the pole with our run takeoff, and then we're trying to speed up the pole with our swing. Okay, there's going to be arguments on how to do that, and I really don't care. If we can get the pole to jump off the ground and then we can speed it up while we're on the pole, I feel like we're pretty successful. Okay, now keep in mind these are hard to see because we've got Nick, and he's a very accomplished vaulter, but I I tried to give an example of an athlete running and really gets the pole to jump off the ground with their takeoff. The top of the pole moves. And then when they swing, it doesn't look like they speed up a lot. He does move with it pretty good, and he's Olympic champion. So you can see why he's pretty successful. But here's what we're trying to look at. We're trying to look at right here. When he hits the pole, it jumps off the ground. And then how fast he swings on the pole later may not be as fast as somebody that does both. Now, I'm not saying he doesn't do bet, but he leans to me as a vaulter number one type. Okay. So when we're coaching that vaulter number one, we've got to ask ourselves, how do I get him to swing faster? Or why is he not swinging faster? And I think he swings pretty good, but I'm being nitpicky here. If we could get him to swing a little faster, you know, maybe he'd jump 6 meters or a little higher. Okay. Let me try to get the next film. I've got a girl here just doing the same thing, just so you can see a different vaulter doing it. See how right off the ground the pole moves? Okay, that's kind of our goal. That's kind of how I determine whether you're a vaulter number one or not. Okay. They're in slow motion, so it's hard to see. Okay, David, here's your guy. This guy is what I call a vaulter number two. If you watch him just a little bit off the ground, he does an unbelievable job of getting a stretch reflex. But the top of the pole, if I can get it to work, the top of the pole sinks a little. And as he starts to swing, it moves. Okay, so I would coach this athlete a little different than I would coach the other one. You can't just all of a sudden say, I'm going to have a big left arm and move the pole off the ground. You've got to understand that his go-to move is that stretch and swing. So you got to keep developing that when you're coaching him. I've ruined a lot of athletes because I'm going to teach them to plant or teaching them to have a drive knee or whatever you want to call it. And I got away from what they do well. I would suggest in this situation that you figure out how to coach them, like, you know, maybe reaching taller with their top hand, you know, maybe trying to get a little taller or the hips off the ground, you know, but not try to totally change them or they're not confident and they don't have their go-to move. Here's Stacy. Now, Greg Hall did a great job of getting her to take off at the end of her career, but that's a hard job because her go-to is the swing vaulter. You see how the pole's, and then the pole moves when she gets that little move on it. Okay, so her go-to move is to swing to move the pole. Let me see if I can stop it for you. Okay, but and there's lots of things that teach you to do that or not. But she'll have compression on the ground. The top of the pole really won't move up. That bottom arm does, and then all of a sudden, as she gets weight on it, the pole moves in the pit. So that's vaulter number two. Vaulter number three, and we're going to use the big guy, Sergey Bubka. He's going to run, the pole's going to come up off the ground, and then he's going to move it again when he swings. So that's what we're trying to coach. Okay. I think this is a better example here. This is our former world record holder, the Frenchman. Now he misses this vault, but it looks like he puts energy through the vault through the whole time. So, it's a crazy one to watch, but as you're watching him, look, the pole jumps off the ground, and then when he makes a move on it, it speeds up again. Speeds up so much the pole's way too low. to me, if you can get a kid that understands how to create energy throughout the vault, you got somebody that's kind of special. Okay. I've run camps throughout the years, and I've done this with thousands of my campers. It's kind of a way to evaluate, what the athlete sees and what they do. But if you got a pencil and paper or a pen and paper, what I'd like you to do is draw me a stick figure of what you think the takeoff should look like. Okay, if you don't, pretend. And what happens is through the years, I've noticed that I've had these kids do this in the camps. It's kind of a big laboratory. I've had these kids do it, and if they've got a big blocky left arm, they pretty much draw that. If they kind of break down and go like, arm that's kind of moves over their head, they pretty much draw that. And my point is, if you don't know what they see in their head, you can't change it. And you could be talking and giving them the best information that you can, but if your two pitchers don't talk or they don't have an idea what it should look like, they can't change. So what I like to do is understand what they look like, and then I go through and I talk about what we need to do to change it. At this same token, everybody talks about a free takeoff, and a free takeoff is great. But if you ask a kid that, they'll say, well, take off before the pole hits the back of the box. Okay. Our world record holder doesn't do that. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but what I like to call it is a non-restricted takeoff. So as we run down and we take off, our chest, our arms are going to expand, and our chest is going to be moved forward without getting stopped by the pole. With that said, I'm going to give you 3 checkpoints to look for when you're watching film. Okay. Now, keep in mind the first part of the talk I was talking about. It's a moving event. It's not a step or not a stopping event. So the first one, if you're right-handed, and it's just the opposite if you're left. First checkpoint is when your right hand is or when you're on your right foot, your right hand should be somewhere around your forehead. The second one is when you're on your takeoff foot, your top hand should be all the way extended. Now this is moving, it's not stopped. And the third checkpoint is before there's flexion in the pole, this would be a non-restricted or a freer takeoff. Okay, your lead knee or drive knee or whatever you want to call it needs to be in front of the support leg before you see a bend. Okay, let me see if I can do this on film here. Okay, checkpoint number 1. Again, if you're left-handed, this is just the opposite. It's left hand, left foot. But you're on the right foot the step before. When you're kind of on the ball of the foot, you notice where he is? Okay, the hand is at the forehead. Okay, if I did this at camp, 95% of the kids, the pole would be right here. Okay, so they're already late a step out. So they're already a step behind where we need to be. So that's checkpoint number 1. Checkpoint number 2 is when we get that support leg, that arm's tall. Now, I kind of like the way he's kind of a vertical or leaning a little bit forward. Okay, but that would be tall. Now, checkpoint number 3, that lead knee or hips are moving forward. And you look at the pole at this point, there's no pressure on the pole. And then the pressure goes as he's extending up through his takeoff. Okay. And notice because of that, and because he's on his takeoff, how his left arm, like Gio said, moves up over his head, putting pressure on the pole. Okay, so with all that said, when do I change a kid's technique? And I think sometimes we go to practice with an idea and we forgot what we did the last 2 or 3 days. So they don't meet this criteria. And they're not in any order, but I try to change the big physical stuff after I get them fit. And I think you got to pay attention to that. You can't be flat and try to imprint a new idea on a kid. So get them fit. I try to do it after I establish a consistent rhythm. Okay. I think a lot of you got to keep in mind, rhythm accelerates learning. Okay. If I just got a wild hair and I think I'm going to do it, but then I don't prepare them with a little rhythm activity or a little vent rehearsal before I do it, that change or that success rate goes way down. Okay. I try to change technique when they're fresh. I try to keep it simple. Sam, make small adjustments. Okay. And I try to change them away from the pit. Vaulters, I mean, a lot of people try to change during a vault practice. They'll get on the runway and do it, and they're working on the run, and they're dialed in by vision. And if we don't change it away from the pit, we don't always have this success because they're always programmed to do what they're doing. So change it and find out what their real run is away from the pit, and then put it back on the pit or whatever you're doing. Maybe it's learning how to swing, but if you take variables out, teaching becomes a little bit easier. We always start with the little things day one, okay? We just make them simple enough where they don't have to be as fit to do those. We start teaching concepts day one. I tell you what, here's a big one. I feel like that when you're teaching a concept, instead of absolutes, like if I teach and put my hand straight out, I don't know what you're teaching there. But if I want to grow at the takeoff or have a big takeoff or something like that, it leaves a little bit of an opportunity for that athlete to fix his own problem. So teach them the concept, not absolutes. And I think that learning accelerates with that. Okay. I think another thing is how you sequence activities. And I hope this is where we're a little different than the other lectures and stuff, is I think that if we sequence them in a way that builds on the next, it gets easier to learn what we're doing. But here's some common things that I do. I have a rule of sevens, and I'm going to tell you where I got this. When I was in college, I had to do a paper on gymnastic activities. And the paper was basically based on how many reps can you do before failure in gymnastics. And the activity had to be a C move or harder. So A, B, C, the moves get harder and harder. And what they found out was they kept getting better, or they could make an efficient move for about 7 reps, and then fatigue comes in. And when fatigue comes in, it becomes dangerous. So I try to use 7 for my guideline. Now, it doesn't mean that's right for you guys, but through that gymnastics study, I found out that if I can be short and quick on our very explosive days that are important, and I can get 7 good reps out of them, and then we're going to do 10 or 12 reps. But if I get them in shape to make 7 quality jumps through that 10 jumps, I think we're pretty good. Now, I use this in conditioning too. When I coached the mile relays, when I was at one of my other schools, I kind of did it with my 200s. If I could get them to run a certain 200 and meet a certain time, but also meet the technical efficiency of what I was looking for, I knew we're in great shape and we're ready to PR. So it kind of a baseline to give you some information to evaluate what you're doing. Okay. This one sounds kind of crazy. I never repeat a successful practice. Okay. Now what this means to me is when you have a practice and you have something, the lights go on, and you have a kid that did something special. Okay. It fatigues the muscle in a different way than just an ordinary practice, because you usually take a couple more when they're ready to learn. And so what I do is, if that was a long run practice, the next time we jump, I try to make it so easy. I run from a different run. It's because 9 times out of 10, the kids think they're going to start at the place they ended, and they forgot how they worked to get to that point. So I try to, for confidence and emotional stuff, I try to never repeat a successful practice. Now, we may use the same idea from a short run. We may do drills. We may do something else. But I think sequencing your practice in which you always get a little buffer and bounce up and have a pause when you leave positive just encourages those kids to have success throughout when you're doing it. Okay. I think Pat Manson talked about this a little bit, but I wanted to just reinforce it a little bit. How I manage meets. Okay. On when we go to meet, we've always got a process goal or objective instead of a height. And you'll hear a lot of the athletes, that I'm going to go jump this. And when I know the kid's talking about that, I try to redirect it because process goals, are learning based, and you can kind of gauge yourself on if your technique's getting better, or if you made the right decision on how aggressive you were, and where you either make it or you don't make it on the other one. So it gives a little bit, gives you a bit of latitude to kind of have more success this way. Early in the season, our goal is to make bars, and this is what I want to keep in mind. I think a lot of people put the bar up and try to jump too much at a bar that's higher than they can make. And so we try to make a lot of bars. And when I was at the University of Kansas, I trained with a guy named Jeff Buckingham, who was our American record for a short stint. And the week before he broke the American record, he put the bar up and made 17 foot 10 times in a row, put his pole back in his bag, and left. And at that time, he made 18 10 3/4 for the American record that weekend. Okay, another training partner, I won't say his name because I don't want to throw mud at him, but his PR was 18.9, and he put the bar at 18 foot, took a jump or two, and then he put it at 18.9 and took a bunch, and he bailed out probably more than he jumped at it. Okay, that same weekend, both those young men, Jeff Buckingham breaks the American record at 18 10 3/4, and the other guy no heights. And I always say you kind of compete like you practice, after you learn the game a little bit. But I think making bars in a meet is totally different than making bars in practice. I think it's a different thing, and I'll talk about that here in a second. Mid-season, I still want to make a lot of bars, but this is where we're trying to increase the starting height and increase the starting intensity a little bit, so we're used to it by the time we get to championship season. And then competition season, we start a little more aggressive, but we have a very direct plan. We've kind of ironed out all our problems, and we go there, and we're going there to do our business. And we're going to start wherever we think we can end up the winner. But we're going to start at a place where we can have rhythm when we start the meet. Warm up. I think the warm up is something that people don't talk enough about. Okay, what's it for? I've done a lot of physiology studies and that kind of stuff, and your body functions best at 102 degrees. Okay, well, and we walk around at 98, but as and I'm talking about our core. If we get our body revved up hot, we're probably more ready to compete than we ever were. So it's for that. It's for mental rehearsal. And what we do is we warm up to get hot to 102. We do some sprint form drills to turn our body on the right firing order, move in the correct sequence. And then we do a little event rehearsal, and then we're ready to go. Okay. We have all our kids write out a pre-meet warm up. Okay. And they hand it to me, and we write it together. I have them write it first. And through the years we kind of change it a little bit, but they give it to me. And then I watch to see if they do their routine or their pre-meet warm up. Okay. The reason this is important to me, I play a lot of golf. And when I have a routine, it calms me down. I'm pre-programming myself to have a good shot and that kind of stuff. And I want to bring that same kind of thing to the kids in the warm-up. I think a pre-meet warm-up, if done correctly, programs you for success. Okay. Sometimes they'll do their pre-meet warm-up correctly and check all the boxes, but they'll be lackadaisical at it. Okay. So they mentally didn't get ready. So I think you've got to understand, sometimes they got to up tempo that same thing. One of my pet peeves is when we go to a runway, we go to a meet, and a kid steps on the runway and he runs through it. He half jumps and half runs through. Okay. When you step on the runway, know what you're doing. You either run through and check your step, or you pole vault. There's no in between. Okay. I feel like when we're doing a warm up, sometimes kids are searching for the reason they're doing that. And I think you need to get rid of that as fast as you can. Okay. I think warm up should be 3 to 4 jumps max. I don't think you should be searching for a feeling. I think you need to go down there with the mindset that we're going to get this done in 3 or 4 jumps. And when you see 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I think it's a recipe for disaster. And if so, you need to warm up a lot better before you get on the runway. 1 jump to get off the ground, your pit pole, and 2 or 3 to get your starting pole and get your standards. When a kid's dialed in like that, I kind of feel like that we're ready to compete. And I think that's what the warm up needs to get you to do. When it's competition time, you're ready. Establish rhythm. Okay. What we try to do is establish it away from the runway. We don't try to establish it on the runway. We do approaches, slide box, strides, accelerations. And the whole deal is to learn what your rhythm is. And we're trying to, I think the pole vault's a very rhythmic event, and we need to do what's necessary to figure out how we can establish our rhythm. Okay. Each athlete's rhythm should start from the first step of their run. Okay. So depends on their personality. If they grab the ball and jerk it and go, maybe that's, the way they are, but we got to figure out how to smooth that out a little bit. We got to figure out how to, not just have a different start every time. And this is the one where I think it's important. Now, a lot of people start rhythms different ways. And I'll use 2 examples. And I like to start on a mark and start going. But through the years, I've learned that sometimes that doesn't work. Now, some people might walk in, some people might jog in, some people might start on a mark. I would like to start on a mark. That's what I'd like to do first. But if I have a kid that maybe takes 2 or 3 steps and can jump up and grab the rim, but if they stand there flat-footed, they can't jump up and grab it. Maybe they they establish rhythm different. So I might let that kid walk in to a mark. Okay. At the same token, I've got a kid that can jump up and grab the rim. Okay. But maybe with the run, it doesn't change much. So they're going to get going out of the back. So we're going to establish his run with stepping on a mark and going. So I think you've got to coach the athlete, not the event in this case. And that's what I would look for is how does that kid establish rhythm? And I've got a saying I've used forever, and I really believe it. I think you learn a lot faster with rhythm. Rhythm overcomes effort. Okay, one of the things that probably that I was excited about talking was I feel like the pole vaults inherently that we don't coach the athleticism into the event. Okay, what I say by that is if your steps not right on 13, the athletes, oh man, I was off. Well, that's not necessarily true. Or they're counting their steps so much that they forget to look at the box where they're supposed to take off. Okay. Those are all good coaching cues, but I think that we've got to coach things into the athlete. Okay. We got to use all our senses. I use the example on this point is a lot of people count to let them to establish a plan. Now that's good for a beginner, or that's good for a teaching sequence. And but I think it's just as good to count 1, 2, 3 out of the back to establish a rhythm and then just not count anymore. Okay. The reason I say that is when you're driving in to park your car, you don't go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, lift plant or whatever. And I'm not saying that's bad. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is open your eyes and look at the box. Use your senses. I think playing games is a great way to work on the vault. Now these are hard to describe a lot of games. We do a game called Anywheres, and the jury's out. I wouldn't do this with beginners, but what we might do is you might start it on the grass, the football field, and you run 10 yards and you take off that line. So you do a staring drill. Okay, you might do that 3 or 4 times, and then you might do it with a straight pole over there, and you might run from 30 feet and try to take off behind the tape wherever you put it there, that's safe, and try to finish a straight pole drill. And then you do the same thing, maybe from 40 feet. So that's not maybe a common stride length. So what you do is you have them run from anywhere, and then they have to complete the whole straight pole drill and go over a bar, or they get a letter, like pig or something like that. So you got to develop those kinds of things with good sensibility and not something that you're going to get hurt, but play games. And then I think this is intelligent. You mimic others. Okay. I think when you mimic others, you learn more about yourself and you learn more, instead, a lot of time we're telling the athletes all the time, put your hands up, put your hands up, put your hands up. And then maybe we should just watch somebody that has good hands. I say, hey, look like him or her. And I think learning happens faster when we mimic things than we do. But with all those examples, I want you to look at this kid. Okay. Mondo's, what he did growing up was he played games. He's stiff bowling. Okay. This is how I learned to vault. Not saying it's the best way, but I think there's something to be thought of when we're doing this. Notice how he runs down here. Let me see if I get this to play where I want it to. He runs down, and as he plants, he slides that top hand up, and then he vaults. Everybody my age and probably within 5 years of me learned to stiff bowl first. And I feel like when you're coming in the box and we learn to slide the hands together and stretch and get our hands, that teaches us to stretch. And that teaches us to let our chest go forward. Okay. So I kind of feel like it's like when you have kids learn to walk before they crawl, they say there's a little bit development skip. And I feel like playing games like this teaches kids to have more data in their bank, and they understand where their body's moving better. Now, watch exactly what Mondo did, and I think this is why he's one of the reasons he's so good. I get this. After he stiff pulls here, he starts mimicking others. Okay, you don't, I feel like he learns so much more in space when he does this. Okay, he's doing stiff pull here, so he's mimicking a stiff pull. And the next one, I can't remember which one's next, is Huffman or, oh, it's Jason. Okay, notice how he drops those double leg swings? I think that's okay to do in practice. You know, what he's learning how to do is learning how to drop his leg and have a big, long lever hitting the pole. You know, and then when he swings, he's on his top hand more. So there's a lot of things you can learn from a double leg swing. Okay. Then he's got to figure out how to do a Huffman roll. This is so cool to me. I feel like Mondo's parents caught on to something. I mean, that was just this crucial, that's missing in development. We're not robots. We got to figure out how we swing better, how we plant better, how we run better. And, you know, growing up playing golf, we mimic like Jack Nicklaus, Lee Trevino. We mimic those. We tried to copy them. Then pretty soon we got a pretty good swing. I think we have to coach that athleticism into the athletes. What affects learning? Okay, this is a hot topic here. The vault group, or it's a social. You go to the meet, all the people in the stands are closed. Hey Jimmy, what are you doing? They're always talking to you. Or the kids sit down on the back of the bench and they just took a vault, and the kid you're competing against, hey, you need to put your arms up better here or whatever. All right. And I'm saying be careful of that and be aware of that. And when your athletes are talking to other athletes, that's great. Or the parents in the stands, that's all great. But they got to understand from the coach that there's one voice. And then so you want them to come back and says, well, Jimmy said that we could do this, or I wasn't doing that. And then you can say, hey, yeah, that's great, but we were working on, those 2 steps coming in the box. So I think that it affects learning and slows down learning if you get a lot of voices without direction. So one voice is very important. Stress can stop you from learning, but it can imprint learning too. Okay, got a really quick story. I hope it's quick. Is with Greg Hall, we did a podium education in Las Vegas one year. So we were going to go give lectures and classes on the people that we thought, the coaches that we thought would make the podium. So it was with USA Track and Field. And during one of the breaks, I went to the motor learning class. And this was the cool part. The guy was up there and he was telling a story about Jim. And Jim was, when you introduced yourself, his short-term memory was gone. So he immediately forgot what you were doing or your name. So they did this 3 days in a row. So it comes up there, hey, Jim, I'm Tom. He leaves away and you ask him who it was and he says, I don't know. Does it again the second day. Hey, Jim, I'm Tom. Can you, how you doing? Great. Turns to his buddy. Who was that? That's how fast he lost it. On day 3, Tom put a tack in his hand. And when he reached out, he goes, hey, Jim, how you doing? My name's Tom. Reached out. And of course, he pulls his hand away because there was some stress. Okay, on day 4, Jim still didn't remember the name. Went up, hey, Jim, it's Tom. But as I reached to grab his hand, he pulled it away. Stress imprinted some learning. So I think what I'm going with this, I think that you got to tailor make what you're doing and add stress to practices at times to imprint what you want to get done. Sometimes, you can't tolerate what they do. Brian Compton from Arkansas, I mean, sometimes those girls are right on tune with him. And that's because he demands, there's some stress there and he uses it in a positive manner. You know, sometimes when there's too many things going on, there's too much stress, we have the opposite. But stress is good, I think. Okay, fitness, you can't, Vince Lombardi used to say, the stronger I get, the meaner I feel. And I really believe that. The stronger the kid gets, okay, the more they're going to accept from you and learn from you. Rhythm or lack of rhythm. Remember, rhythm overcomes effort. It's kind of one of my mottos. Okay, pole vault's a skill. Here's what I think you need to look for. I think it takes skill to run tall with good posture. It takes a little discipline. Running fast, tall, and putting your hands over your head is a learned skill. You try it. If you haven't done it in a while, just try to run fast, put your hands over your head. You've got to develop some kind of balance and learn and coordination to develop the skill. Running fast and putting your hands over your head while keeping a high heel recovery. That's a hard thing to do. And that's kind of what we're trying to teach them to do. So create activities that you can run fast with high knees and rhythmically put your hands over your head. Okay, move the pole before you swing. Okay, that's more of a thought process, but that's a skill. Come up there and get that pole to move and then swing, or swing as it's moving. Swing up before you go to the bar. That's a discipline or another skill. You watch the younger vaulters, they swing and go for the bar. Well, you have to acquire that skill before you can swing up all the way and feel the positions you need to do. So pole vault's a high level skill. So you've got to practice these things away from the pit. Athletes learn when they're ready, okay? I just feel good coaches get them ready a little faster. And that's kind of our goal, is to figure out if we can accelerate learning with athletes. Okay, again, at the beginning, I said, try to take away some things when you're watching films. I think good technique is moving in the right sequence. So, or basically, if I'm going to, be sprinting and I have high knees and I pick up my heel, then my toe, and then my knee, it might look normal. But if I picked up my knee, I'll kind of show you that. This is improper technique. I don't know if you can see all of me. Let me get back a little further. But I think this is what the vault's all about. You can't really see it. But if I pick up my knee first and then my foot, you can't see. Okay, buddy, you can try it later. Pick up your leg and then put your knee to your hamstring and then lift up your toe. Looks kind of awkward. But if you pick up your toe up, heel up, knee up, it's a good looking circular movement and looks pretty efficient. Okay, that's what we're trying to do with the vault. So watch this. I think that you've got to swing with your legs first. Look at him take off, get all the way big, and then he swings the legs, and then he goes to his shoulders. So many young vaulters think about swinging at their shoulders first. So good technique to me is, pick up the pole, drop the pole before you take off, get your hands up before you jump, and sequence. Move forward before you swing after you move forward, and on. It's sequential. And when you figure out that picture in your head of that drawing that we had, I think you'll have a pretty good time. With that said, that's all I got. So if you got any questions, all right. I'm sorry I didn't have any jokes. Sorry I was slow, but we'll get on.
All right, thanks, Coach. I have a couple questions here for you. I'm going to go back to kind of the beginning of the presentation a little bit. And you talked about keeping score with the jumps. And when you're keeping score on these different jumps, whatever session it is, what are you looking for in keeping score? Like, does each athlete have a different thing they're focusing on, and you're keeping score on that, and you're kind of judging whether that was proficient or not?
Well, if we go back and we say we're going to have a 10 jump practice, and this could be for anything, but you can do, I mean, real simple, you just make some misses. Okay, say you make 8 out of 10, so your score's 80. And then you might have a different column where it's makes and misses and objectives. And the objective is to have your hand all the way up when you hit takeoff. That might be objective. And I'm going to, just like a classroom teacher, you know, where they have objectives and then you measure them. It needs to be measurable. So then what we do is say I want to have a takeoff spot plus or 6 inches of this spot. You know, how many out of 10 do I score? And I use 10 just because that's a simple, everybody can use 70%, 80%, 90%. But I mean, it could be anything, or we could do just the objectives, you know, but we're measuring. And when you get a measurement, and if we can stay over that 70%, I think the light bulb goes off and all of a sudden the kid gains confidence and you know, 70%, 90% of the time, everybody's going to get better.
Great. Next question, kind of a 2-part question. If you were coach, so you talked about vaulter number 1, vaulter number 2, and vaulter number 3. If you were coaching a beginner vaulter, what vaulter would you achieve, like want to get to? And then the second part of that is, what misconceptions do you see in beginner vaulters that maybe you didn't start coaching, but you know, misconceptions they might have about the vault?
Well, I think, well, number one, I was asked one time, what do you coach first? The plant or the swing? And I say, I coach them both together. Now, keep in mind that, you know, when I did a clinic with Sergey Bubka in 2002 in Jamaica, I asked him that same question. How would you start a beginner? And he says, off a chair. So basically he's taking the variable out and he's stepping on a chair, and then they're stepping forward off it and riding the pole to a distance. So they learn how to move on the pole first. Okay. So I kind of agree with him. I'm going to teach him how to move with the pole first. And then a beginner, I'm going to teach him to slide the hands together for me, because I want to learn how to get my hands as high as I can. So I'm going to teach him that. And then I'm going to teach him to what it feels like to be in the right spot to take off and move the pole. So I'm going to teach him for distance. And then while I'm teaching for distance, I'm going to teach them how to pick up their feet and land on their butt. So I'm going to write a progression like that's really simple to obtain, that and maybe not having a bar right away, learning how to move the pole and move on the pole first. That would be my first goal.
Great. Do you find, or do you approach coaching boys and girls any differently? So you've had success with both the boys and the women's at the college level. Do you approach them differently in any way?
Well, absolutely not. Technically, we're trying to meet the same, you know, Todd Lehman, we're riding with Greg Hall and Todd Lyman, and we're going to meet. And Todd's, they were arguing about technique, or we were arguing about somebody that had thought this process was right and that. And Todd said, well, it's Sir Isaac Newton. And what he meant by that is you coach things that by physics, you know, you run it down there and you drop the pole before you lift the pole. And then you got to jump off the ground before you get jerked off the ground or whatever. But my point is maybe emotionally they have some differences. But I think if you go back and you have positive reps all the time and you know why you're doing something, I think they're the same. I think they're athletes. I was in a job interview for the University of Arizona, and the athletic director asked me that. And I was kind of stunned. And I said, hey, they're all athletes. They're all trying to do the same thing. What's different is their capabilities. Maybe they don't need to hold as high. Maybe they don't need to be on as big as pole. You got to do what they can do to be successful. So I'd say for me, I try not to. Now, emotionally, it might be different, but technically, no.
All right. You were also talking about, you went in, you talked a little bit about your rules of 7 and then repeating practice. And then we went into talking about meet warm-ups, which I think was really important. And off of that, you said you kind of have a plan. Each athlete has a plan for a meet. I'm wondering if you have a target number of jumps for athletes in meets. Is that different between athletes, or is there a certain spot number you're shooting for in a meet?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's determined by the athlete, though. Our goal for our first meet is I want to see 7 made bars. I mean, 7, sorry, 3 made bars. And then we can start chasing whatever we're chasing. So I want them to start low enough. And it's a little damaging to your ego, because a lot of athletes will want to start, at 17 foot, and that may be where they need to start at mid-season or late season. But I want to see, because I think it's an art to make a bar in a meet that's a different feeling, a different pressure set in a meet. So early season, I want to make 3 in a row. Mid-season, I want to make three bars also, but I want to do it at a higher stress level, so we're starting a little higher. And then at championship season, the old adage is, maybe we're at a big bar, 4, 5, 6, 7 in there. But I think we can learn a lot from Sam. Is when he'll go to major competition and start first bar because he likes jumping, making. That's how he gets into the rhythm, and it makes it easy, and I think it's a rhythm event. If we forget that and just I'm going to PR, we just became result oriented instead of process oriented, and I think you're going to just have more losses than wins. And to me, I mean, that's a vague answer a little bit, but I think as the season goes on, it becomes very clear what that strategy for that athlete needs to be.
Excellent. So on that, then, I'm getting you've mentioned jumping bars is a real important piece. How often in practice then are you jumping bars for height?
Well, probably every day, but every day we jump. Here's what we do. Early in the year, I'll have a bunch. If I'm trying to work on something technical and that bar gets in the way, what I mean by gets in the way, where I'll say to the kid, you got to make the takeoff before you make the bar. So if they're trying to make the bar before they're making the takeoff, I may take that bar away and have a bungee, and try to learn that skill, with a little less pressure of having a bar or a different focus, and the kids, it's funny because you'll go and go to a big meet and they'll have a bungee up and everybody's smoking the bar. And then the bungee, and then the bar goes up and all of a sudden a different kid comes out. I think you've got to do enough activities that you create good habits, but maybe early when I got a lot of vaulters going and we don't have enough time, we'll do more bungees than bars. But I think, I have a buddy, Jeff Buckingham, who was teaching his kid. He was American record holder. He was teaching his kid to vault. And the school didn't have a crossbar when we were just starting. And he comes to me and goes, man, I don't know what to do. And I go, what? You're American record holder. What do you mean you don't know what to do? Because I don't have a crossbar. And I think once he hits it the first time, he's going to be afraid. So I think you have to have a plan so that you get positive impacts on each jump. So here this week, we jumped 2 days this week, and we're going to jump with bars. Okay, the whole thing. Now I might have a practice where I start out 5 bungees, 5 bars, and I might mix it. But I think that's why I did this talk is you got to have a baseline for your philosophy, and then you have to put it into work with how you're going to evaluate it, and then you can make up your own rules. But over the years, there's certain gut feelings that I have that somebody else is not going to have, or they have different ones than me. But if you don't have a system, you can't develop what you're going to do.
Awesome. So another topic that has come up in a series of the talks here has been the conversation between, long run jumps versus run jumps. And I know that you mentioned that, not repeating a successful practice, but what is your thought on, long run jumps, and how often should we be doing that, especially when we get into, if we're talking below college level, when we're getting into the club scene and the high school scene and things like that.
Well, I mean, I think that's individual. Um, is I steal this from Jim. We have our short run. We try to keep within two steps. Now I say steps. Everybody else says strides. But if I was running from my long run was 18 steps or 9 lefts or 9 rights, whatever it is, then 16 would be our short, because our rhythm needs to be pretty close. Now we might have some drill jumps from 10 and stuff like that when we're trying to work on something different. But I try to establish a certain rhythm. And that's for an older athlete. But for a younger athlete, I always feel like that they need to jump where they can make the most bars. Okay. So if you got a kid that can go, 3 lefts, 6 steps and make a bar, but then they go to 8 or 10 and they start missing bars, maybe you make 10 bars from that short run, and then you maybe 3 or 4 jumps from the longer run. So you kind of mix them. I like to move around on runs a lot, because I think it gives athlete a more ability to have a bigger database to pull from. So I think they need to learn all the runs, and we can work on different things. I think you can learn how to swing on a pole from like 4 steps, and that you learn to, 4 or 6 steps, you run down there and you don't have enough speed to move it with your plant, but you're moving slow enough so you can have really tall plant, but then you can swing to move the pole in the pit. I think you got to understand what you're working for, and then kind of tailor make that practice and get a rhythm for the practices. What also is funny, although I never repeat a successful practice, I try to have practices that I can repeat over time. That's a baseline practice so that I can evaluate. So I think as whatever, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to be in those situations to know. Understand your plan and then work towards that plan. And if your plan is for the kids to run a long run and you think they're going to be successful, practice it. Some kids can't do it though. Some kids can't run a long run because of emotion jump. Maybe if you're an emotional jumper, 9 times out of 10, you better run short run more in practice, because you're emotional. If you're not emotional that day, maybe you don't get on the poles you should to and have a successful practice.
Another thing that you talked about was, keeping records of different things, and I guess going back to Pat's talk, where he talked more about meets and things like that. Are you keeping track of the athletes' information, bar height, grip, step, poles, those types of things? Do they keep track of that stuff? What types of things do you and your athletes keep track of there on meet day?
Well, that's kind of progressive. We all have a notebook, and some are good at using the notebook and some aren't. Used to be when I was younger, I could keep track of every pole, every step, every grip. That's what I think Earl Bell does really good, is matches up the guy's run with his grip height and what they're successful. So I used to be able to do that really good and memorize all that. I don't anymore, but there's tendencies that you see. I have my kids write down their score on a dry erase board. So if we're doing 10 jumps, they write it down, and I don't let them write it down after 3 jumps. You write it down after the next one, because you got to stop and understand what you did, and a positive affirmation needs to happen that way. And when you just go through the motions, you lie to yourself. Okay, you're not really that good. And I want to say to them at the end, I said, see, listen, your ego was too big. Why'd you start here? And I want to be able to point to that. So no, I don't keep track of it, like in a notebook. To me, I kind of lose track when I do that. That's not the way I function. But we write a lot of stuff down. Now we may erase it after practice, but I tend to remember it. Like, okay, you were 6 out of 10 and your objectives was 3 out of 10. And what are you doing? And I may get in their grill and say, hey, I want you to win the warm up. And they, for a lot of times, they don't know what I'm talking about. And all I means is go freaking do it faster and you finish first, because I want them to establish a mental presence. And I think that's what the good coaches really do. They demand a lot from those kids. And there's a lot of people that know things a lot more than I do on the vault technique and that stuff. But, we play high percentage stuff. So they practice a high percentage stuff. And the more disciplined I am with them, the more discipline they get. And the odds are it's going to be hard to beat us at championship time. And that's just because the numbers don't lie. One year I did this, and I know I'm getting windy on this answer, but I tracked all the kids in the men's national meet. I went throughout their high meet and I threw out their low meet, and then I averaged their heights. I did this 3 years in a row, and their height, if they averaged 19 foot, and the next guy averaged 18.8, next guy 18.6, or whatever it is, it went 1, 2, 3, all 3 years in a row. And 1 year it was right all the way through 6, and 1 year it was like flip flopped all the way through 6, like the 6th place guy beat the 4th place or something like that. So the numbers don't lie. And if you're disciplined enough to follow that stuff, you're going to learn a lot about your coaching style. Is if you know how to write objectives like we learned in college for teaching a class, and you hold them accountable, there's a method to the madness in it.
Well, that's very helpful, and thank you for that. I'm not seeing any other questions in the YouTube live stream.
Too simple.
And yeah, and but there's a lot of really really good stuff in here tonight, Coach, and I'm very very thankful for your time and just the time we put in to meet before the series here and then tonight as well. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to switch over here and just take a moment to, again, recognize you and your success. Again, Coach Tom Hayes here at the University of Kansas, pole vault coach. And I want to thank our viewers for coming out tonight. And I want to remind them to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. And thank you. And we look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you.
Hey, keep up the good work. I love this stuff.